Hey everyone, George Christie again with Wine Industry Network. Welcome to the second session of the Wine Industry Sales Symposium. Now this session is titled Small Producers and Large Distributors, a Winning Combination. And we've got three high-level distributor folks from the three biggest distributors in the country. We're going to be talking about how their companies are working with smaller producers, right? Because that's always sort of a challenge out there, right? How do you get the attention of the big guys if you're not a big guy yourself? Really interesting conversation. Before we get started, I want to thank the session sponsor today for this particular session is Comerica Bank. Comerica Bank has been wonderful for us to work with, and want to thank them for all their support. Our moderator today is Eric Guerra. Eric is an industry veteran and the perfect guy to lead today's conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Eric. But once again, everybody, take advantage of this chat feature and submit those questions. All of those speakers are in the room. They're going to take your questions as they come in. All right, Eric, I'm going to hand it off to you. Let's take it from here. Thank you.
This session is sponsored by Comerica. To grow your winery, move beyond everyday banking.
You need more people to taste your wines, join your club, and stay in it. Red Chirp's here to help. Get more and better leads from your website. Requests go right to your phone, so no one has to log in and staff it. And after they leave, you can still continue the conversation and make more sales. Club members should feel like friends, and friends text each other. Texting with Red Chirp is so easy. You'll never have to buy work phones or share your personal number. Plus, you'll reach people 10 times faster and get more responses, too. With all these new sales, you'll need a better way to collect payments. Do it by text with Red Chirp. It's more secure, more convenient, and you'll get paid 6 times faster. Text messaging will get you more leads, close more sales, and build stronger relationships. You make it possible. Red Chirp makes it easy.
Thanks, George. I appreciate that introduction. And I'm very excited about our segment today because over the last 20 years, I've had the privilege of working with very large wholesale companies. And I've done it with small wineries. I've done it with large wineries like Kendall Jackson. But for a small supplier, as this segment's going to focus on, how do they navigate the system? How do they navigate these large wholesalers? And sometimes they seem daunting. Sometimes it seems challenging. And so we have a panel of outstanding members today that are going to navigate, give you guys kind of insights and tips. And from their perspective, how can you make your way through working with a larger wholesaler? It's not as daunting as it may seem. So, my name is Eric Guerra. We appreciate everybody being here today. We have a live chat segment, as you could tell here, so you could actually chat live with our speakers. They will be live when this airs. And so if you could ask questions as we go along, we will give you feedback right live when this airs, as I mentioned. So I've been in the industry for 20 years. One of my first jobs was with Kendall Jackson, and I stood up in front of a wholesaler. And I've watched a lot of businesses. I've watched a lot of meetings kind of go horribly. And I was at a national sales meeting. And as I was standing there, I was referring to the group as completely inaccurate information. I was actually calling, wasn't Southern Glaciers at the time, it was Southern Wine and Spirits. And I maybe called them RNDC 4 or 5 times. Now, when I got off stage and everybody was looking at me kind of odd, and I was so nervous, and we all go through this because it was my first big job in the industry, I was mortified. And, I had Rick Tigner at the time, who's the head of Kendall Jackson, come up to me and say, listen, it's not easy. You gotta just talk to them like they're trying to run a business just like we are. They want to sell as much wine as you do. And you kind of got in your head a little bit. Well, fast forward a year later, I was again at a national sales meeting. Jess Jackson was there, Rick Tigner was there, and I got a standing ovation from the entire panel. It was every head of state. It was an incredible experience, uplifting, but I was prepared. I went to the meeting in a different way. I really listened to my experienced elders, and they told me how to manage the meetings. Well, you fast forward 20 years later, and I've been to a couple thousand of them, and I've seen some great ones and I've seen some challenging ones. And we're going to introduce our three people right now, our three panel experts, because they are some of the best in the industry to help people like me when I was first starting off and the teams that I've managed. So the first person I would like to introduce is Darren Cliff. He's the Senior Director of Business Development at Aspect Fine Wine and Breakthrough Beverage Group. So Darren, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine.
Absolutely. The next person is Patty Signorelli. Patty is the Vice President of Supplier Business Development Fine Wine for Republic National Distributing Company. So thank you, Patty.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And then Cindy Leonard. So Cindy Leonard, I had to learn the title twice because we are very proud to announce today that she was just recently promoted. Her prior role was the Senior Vice President of Supplier Management for Business Development for Southern Glaciers, but now Cindy is the Executive Vice President and General Manager of the Fine Wine Division, one of the coolest jobs on the planet. Congratulations. Well deserved.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you.
You're welcome. So Darren, we're going to start off with you. So please tell us a little bit about your background, where you come from, how did you get to this role, and then how your company manages small suppliers, or approaches more small suppliers, I should say.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric. And congratulations, Cindy.
Thank you.
The background, I ended up in the wine business almost by accident out of a necessity to get some credits in college while at Cal Poly. I enjoyed wine. My father was a collector. My uncle was a home winemaker, so I've been around wine and food. And knocked on the door at a winery in Paso Robles to see if they needed some help in the cellar, and lo and behold, they did. And so that was really what plunged me into the wine business, and that ultimately led to, upon graduation, going to work for that same wineries. The wife of the owner owned a small distributor, and upon graduation, they needed someone to go drag a bag around Santa Barbara in the Central Coast. So from getting out of college in the mid 90s, I was plunged right into calling on-prem, off-prem, and chains, so all three channels all at once. Start early in the morning doing resets, then go see your off-prem independent customers, and then drag a bag to all the wine buyers in the on-prem trade up and down State Street. So, I said it happened by accident, but I fell in love, obviously, immediately. From there, did some time with Young's Market when they began the Estates Group, which was really a kind of revolutionary new fine wine, smaller division within a larger wholesaler. After that was started in 2001, I joined about a year later in 2002. And most of my career has been spent with Young's Market Company, with the Estates Group. I did do a short amount of time at Jackson Family, like you, Eric.
Yeah.
I was working with their distributor arm in California, which is called Regal Wine Company, and had a very good experience there. And then after that, went back to Jackson Family until this most recent expansion in my career with Breakthrough Beverage. So worn a lot of hats, from being a sales rep on the street, like I said, and covering all three channels, to running divisions, to director of sales, and then really found myself kind of on the portfolio management side. And what I think in distributors now, we just basically have taken and morphed into almost supplier business development is the more hierarchical term for portfolio management.
So what I like about your background, though, is you came out of the winery. You actually were a sales rep for a winery, if I heard that correctly, and then you went into the wholesale side. So you know what it's like to be out on the street. You know what it's like to be calling on
and to be
wholesalers and retailers.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be clear, the wife of the winery, while representing that winery, she had a small distributorship of other small, all Central Coast wineries. So it was a little collection of Central Coast wineries there. Nice. But yeah, absolutely. The experience of being out on the street selling is invaluable, especially when you get into these sort of more back of the distributorship or back of the house wholesaler positions. And I found that I lean on those experiences, even though they're going back pretty far in my memory these days.
Yeah.
I lean on them a lot. So fast forward to today and where we're at with Aspect, and I think that's a good launching point, how I got here to Aspect in the last 6 months, and what we're trying to do with Aspect Fine Wine is really built around how do we engage more meaningfully with the smaller boutique wineries and and have a place carved out within Breakthrough Beverage to really handle that luxury fine wine space that is exploding. And if we look at any sort of analytics, whether it's our own internal analytics or if we dive into external analytics from everything from chain grocery analytics like Nielsen to TD Links, everything's pointing to the luxury fine wine space is not slowing down. It was accelerating prior to COVID, and COVID has only really poured a little bit more gas onto that fire. So starting at the beginning of the year, I was approached to launch Aspect Fine Wine and with Breakthrough Beverage Group, and it's been an amazing opportunity. What we're trying to build is we're trying to take 13 markets that historically have been a little bit disparate. You got legal issues across state lines, and everybody's kind of fine wine strategy within Breakthrough was a little different. So how do we get that together and harness it to one uniform, cohesive strategy across the network? And that's what Aspect Fine Wine is about and what it has been launched to do. We are squarely at the luxury space. So, if you're thinking traditional Nielsen, think super luxury on up, that's our strategy. And we're really about trying to develop and almost incubate brands into Breakthrough Beverages network. We have another craft strategy called Trident that's somewhat similar, and probably a lot of the ideas around Aspect came from that success of Trident, where Trident is a craft kind of almost incubation house for smaller craft spirits. And
Right.
Think of it like almost like a bench. If something really you want, as a wholesaler, you always want to be catching on to that next evolving brand, that next brand that's going to catch fire. And so Trident has really been a successful launching point for that. And if things, if Trident does their job well from a craft spirit standpoint, then a brand does become larger and grows into the Breakthrough network and almost graduates out of Trident. Aspect's not really about that. We're not looking to graduate wineries out of Aspect into Breakthrough. We're really about staying true to small family-owned estate wineries that are putting out world-class wines and that really fit in that super luxury, ultra premium category. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you outlining how Aspect how it's structured and how it approaches. We're going to get into some details. We're going to ask, since you've been doing this quite some time, we're going to get into some details later on in this segment about how to approach you guys for the first time if you're not already a supplier, and what do those things look like. So thank you very much. Patty, go ahead. Please tell us a little bit about your background and how RNDC at this point approaches small fine wine suppliers.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of similar to Darren, I started from the ground up as well. I graduated from college and I was looking for a sales job. And at the time, my brother was a sommelier at a fine dining restaurant in Santa Barbara. And he said, well, I have these wine reps that come in. Why don't you try that? So I dipped my toe in and I started working for Henry Wine Group as a chain merchandiser. And it was the hardest job of my life, still to this day. And I worked there for a smaller distributor within California for 7 years. And then I went to go work for a supplier. So at the time, let me back up. It was Folio Fine Wine Partners. And at the time, it essentially was a small supplier. And, it was just Michael Mondavi's own family-owned brands. And we were trying to figure out how we succeeded in a large distributor. So I was there for 10 years. My last role there, I managed the country. So I was able to see what other distributors were doing across the country. And about 3.5 years ago, I went to go work for RNDC and under supplier business development. So I find that my experiences through my professional experiences have led me to be better understanding to our suppliers from all sizes. So I manage suppliers that are large in size, that have tremendous, weight within our company, and also our small fine wine suppliers as well. So my love and passion is definitely with fine wine. And again, that's a term that is loosely said in a lot of ways, fine wine, but that is where my heart is at. So how we manage small suppliers within our company. So again, like you mentioned, Eric, it is daunting, I'm sure, for many people to come in. They're like, oh, this is a big company. How do we ever get attention? And we look at it a little differently. So in all 33 states, we have some sort of fine wine division. from our small states in South Dakota to our larger states in Texas and California. Our divisions are segmented in ways that we can focus on fine wine, maybe more of the grocery store, chain wines, and then spirits. Our company is also holistically, we're 52% wine within wine and spirits. So we are very much dedicated into fine wine. And we have a couple other things that are coming down the pipeline that I think will be very exciting for some of these smaller producers to succeed well within our company. But all of our executive leadership all came from wine. They were all, that their passion is also wine. So it is a big charge for us to be able to service and distribute fine wine across the United States.
Now, did you say that you started off in San Diego? Is that where it was?
No, I started in Orange County.
Orange County. Well, I went to San Diego State, so I just lump it all together. But
yeah, it's about the same.
Yeah, well, I guess, right? Growing up on the beach, my first experience was, I went to San Diego State, so it makes sense that I'm in alcohol for the rest of my life. I've had that comment said to me many times. But my first experience was out of Temecula, which isn't as too far from Orange County as well. And Callaway Winery was the first wine I ever had. And wouldn't you know it, I actually went back and managed Callaway later on and was one of my little portfolio brands. Nice. So it does kind of come full circle. But one of the things you mentioned I thought was excellent was a national kind of view of the world. A lot of people coming up sometimes don't see that. You make your way up through, let's say, Southern Glazers in Texas or RNDC in Florida, and you just kind of stay in that silo. It's really brilliant to be able to see the world, the country from a national perspective. When I finally came down off the KJ perch and went, calling on you guys and large retailers, I was blown away by the complexities of every state, the specific details of every state. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes as well, because just because you're a partner of RNDC doesn't mean you need to be a partner in every state as well. Sometimes suppliers stretch themselves too thin and go too wide. And sometimes, it's good just to be a partner in a few states where it matches up. So. And I hold nothing against you because of Orange County. San Diego is a little cooler, but it's okay. So we're going to, Cindy Leonard, we mentioned before, congratulations on your promotion. Please tell a little bit about your background, because obviously you've made it to an outstanding level, and how Southern Glazers, which is one of the biggest distributors in the world, handles small suppliers.
Well, let's see, you're from San Diego State. I'm from Arizona State, so it's really a coin toss as to who is going to be in the liquor business, right?
We thought that people at Arizona drank more than us. We thought people at Chico got a little crazy, but yeah.
But it was mostly tequila and so on. But now,
I guess you're right.
At a place in Scottsdale.
Sure.
After I graduated, surprisingly enough, from Arizona State, I went into the hallowed halls of Gallo. So along the way, every step I've taken, I have never, ever forgotten the hard work, the work ethic, the discipline, knowing your product, knowing it well, and knowing how to represent it correctly to the buyers, right, to the consumer. Because at the end of the day, the supplier relationship is vital. This consumer relationship is critical. So, you can have, we've found, and we've done some surveys, you can have all these names and titles after your name. The buyer really wants to know, you're going to be there, you're going to support your product. Do you know what you are talking about right in front of me and why it should matter to me? So I think that's a big aspect of learning to work with fine wine. Going forward, I went to go, after Gallo, I went to go work for Remy Amérique and really understood and dove headlong into a massive education on wine overall. Took some UCLA extension courses because the court wasn't really doing anything at the time, and I don't think WSET was even around. So that, and then I went to go work for Rick Tigner and Jackson family. It's our common thread.
Do we all make our way through that somehow?
I think we did.
Yeah. I think Patty's the only one who didn't have
I did not.
But you've had your own path with Foley and everything else. So there you go.
Right. But the trick was just pivoted, as we all know, and started Regal Wine Company. So talk about being a small supplier. We had a company that didn't even have a name. We're out selling, I'm in Beverly Hills, getting absolutely harassed by the Southern Wine and Spirits people because they lost some brands. And I mean, I remember on Prego and Camden Drive and getting in some argument with some guy. But the thing is, at the end of the day, I said to the guy who was saying, why are you in here? Because they've lost brands. It's like, look, do you like wine? Do you like wine? Because you're in there talking to him about wine. Yes, yes, I do. Well, I'm going to pull a cork on a Stone Street Chardonnay that is absolutely going to blow you back against the wall.
One of my favorites.
At the end of the day, you're a fan of wine. Pull up a glass. It doesn't matter. Just let's be what we need to be for the consumer here, which was the buyer at the time. And that's really how with coming in, we're going to approach it. We're going to make sure that we've got the correct. We're absolutely revamping in our entire route to market, fine wine, craft spirits, all of that. It's really an incredible time for us as we evolve our route to markets to meet the needs of the customer centric first, because the relationship is what makes us really valuable. And then also making sure that the supplier understands exactly what we're going to do for them. Don't overpromise, do not underdeliver, and say who you are and be exactly that. So it's an authenticity that is really wrapped in a lot of self-discipline and never, ever, ever forgetting that the truth is on the streets. And that's what no matter what supplier it is, large or small, having worked for a no-name supplier that became Regal, it was about representing your products very well in the correct places that are really going to matter. Then you're doing good works for all three, yourself, the customer, and the supplier, no matter what the size.
So thank you very much for that. And we're going to get into some details now, because I want to definitely get into how does that actually equate to the first meeting or the introduction or how to approach you guys. Now, as I mentioned before, I've managed a lot of sales teams outside of just the brand and viticulture and everything else in the winery. But one of the most interesting things that I found when I went to small wineries, and I actually wrote a book on this called When Great Wine Is Not Enough. And the reason I wrote this book was from a sales and marketing perspective. When wineries start or they revamp, we hire the most talented winemakers, architects to make this beautiful winery, but they never hire someone like me up front, or a sales and marketing person, or someone to put together a wholesale strategy, or if they're going to go wholesale at that time. It's just an automatic knee-jerk reaction. I'm going to call, call in Breakthrough, I'm calling RNDC to get in the market. And I know a guy and he'll know somebody and he'll call Patty and that kind of stuff. It is almost unbelievably the same thing every time. And you hire a really cool salesperson that looks awesome with a nice shirt like this. And I'm blown away about how 80-90% of the time I've seen people just blow it on the first meeting, or even how to approach you guys. So I wrote a whole book on it. But Darren, I'm going to start with you. So let's start from the beginning, starting new with your company. Okay. So I have a question. So where should they start? And by the way, this is a real question that when you just sit down at the phone and you go, okay, I want to be in that market, and these guys are someone told me that they're great to be with. Where does someone start even with your company?
I think we need to unpack that a little bit and start about where does the winery start with themselves. And that is that these wineries need to hone first and foremost their own authentic story, and they have to have a brand story, a salvo, if you will, around from my perspective. Aspect again is truly dealing in the fine wine space. They need to, whether it be honing that through social media, through their DTC, et cetera, they need to come with a compelling story.
Now, and let me ask you a question, because I like that quite a bit, actually. And thank you for taking a half step back for me. So their own story, to me, I've challenged a lot of my brand marketing people with this when they've come to me with thick plans and little plans, something that you could say that no one else can say, because every one of them almost looks identical. I mean, do you agree with that? That it has to be something where you guys can hook on to, not I own a vineyard and blah, 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 right? I mean.
Yeah, and it can be a combination of all those things. I own a vineyard and this is, things that I'm doing that's unique in the vineyard, and, down to, my brand strategy is really going at this channel. I want to be, built in the on-premise, for example, and that's where I really see my brand. But it's got to be beyond the vision of kind of what you want. I mean, backing up, what I would say to small wineries is stay away from, I made this wine, I've got to distribute it, 3 tiers how I got to do it. So I better just call, Patty, Darren, and Cindy. There needs to be something a little bit more compelling. And we see all different types. So if you're going to interact and get involved with, say, Aspect, it's identifying the markets that you want to be in first. Again, what is that strategy that you're looking to drive? I would argue that for most small wineries that, unfortunately, this puts a little bit of weight on a little extra weight on California than other states because of the propensity of wineries in California. But start in your home market. Start building out that messaging and that brand platform in your own home market. And then I would argue that, if you do want to look out across the greater, 50, the broker model is not a bad model. It's still alive and well. And you don't have to hire a sales guy with a nice shirt, like you put it, and put them on full-time staff. You can actually outsource that there's a whole proliferation of consulting firms that are popping up out there. I mean, I know 750.com has done a pretty good article on them recently about these marketing companies that can really be of benefit. And then I would pick, the markets. I mean, some of the stories, we have wineries that they're a winery based in Sonoma, but they've got a connection, to a state because of something they did there.
Well, sometimes we find like the owner used to live there or had a business there. That happens quite a bit.
Yeah, whatever. There's a familial connection. Yeah, there's a familial connection. And in this instance, it's actually tied into the winery's, DNA. So of course that market's going to be a natural market to try to go after.
I think one of the things I'm hearing you saying too is you got to maybe just don't cast this wide net. I want to be in restaurants. I want to be in Whole Foods. Sometimes it's just and I got to be in every market. So you're saying that is the thinner plan that's more condensed and more thought through on just the finer details than just an umbrella. I think you're saying that that's the best way to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the alternative to that, and what we see often, is it's a production-based plan, which I would argue is probably not really a plan. It's that I made 5,000 cases of wine. I need to sell it. I need distributors.
I love that, by the way. That's it's funny you said that. I put that in my book. I'm like, just because you made 10,000 cases doesn't mean you actually can sell 10,000 cases. That's what you're supposed to think about up front.
I'm going to call every distributor that I can.
But the vineyard's that size. You don't understand.
And I'm going to start with the open markets, because then I don't have to deal with like franchise laws and all this other stuff. And I don't want to deal with bottle states. So I'm going to go to the open markets first. And whoever signs up for the 5,000, then I'll stop looking. I mean, that's not really a plan. And unfortunately, we see a lot of that. And I would say that, again, it gets back to really honing your own brand story. I mean, the world is so interconnected now, more than ever, as we all know. Really drilling down to your own brand story, your own authentic story. What the customer wants today, especially in fine wine, which I think we're all here to discuss, is they want authenticity. They want a connection to the brand. They want to know why, how. They want more information than they've ever asked for before in the marketplace today. And today's consumer is really looking for that connection. They want to get connected to a brand on an authentic level. So they got to start driving that first and foremost. And from that, then they can start mapping out what a 3-tier plan might look like.
Okay. Patty, kind of dovetailing off of what he's mentioning there, what looks like, what is a really great first introduction meeting to you? I mean, just so you could really, for someone like me who's very visual, I sit there and I think, okay, what is that 30 minutes going to be like with Patty and her team? And I'm really interested to hear what you think works really, really well. Is it a big, thick plan? Is it a short one? What do they bring to the table and what impresses you?
So, no, I do not think it's a big, thick plan. Kind of dovetailing what Darren said, it's very, for a winery, well, let me back up. Our business is a very traditional business, right? We used to go in, here are the accounts we want to be in, and we advertise in a very traditional way. And now as, the millennials and everyone, like what Darren was saying, people want authenticity. Like, we need to see something of how you touch that consumer. How are you getting that consumer to pull your wine off the shelf or buy it off of a wine list? So for me, if it was a first introduction, a perfect meeting would be, hey, this is my brand, tell us your brand story, tell us, some history. Then this is how our DTC model is. And this is what we've pulled from those analytics of our demographics. These are the people that we think are buying our wines based off our DTC model. Then they say because production is going to come into it no matter what. I mean, in a perfect world, it probably doesn't, but it does. Say, okay, well, we have 10,000 cases. We want to be able, we don't have enough for the whole country, but we want to, spot market these states where we want to grow and then kind of build from there. These are our benchmark brands. I think that's very important too. And I think within all of our companies, we're able to, if you say we want to be benchmarked against winery A, B, and C, what kind of distribution does that winery have within your company? All of our companies are very able to segment these accounts for them, saying, okay, let's have a target list. This is what we want to target. Coming to the table with how they want their wine distributed. Like, again, is it chains? No chains. Is it certain chains that they don't want to be in? Is it specific, just Michelin star accounts, whatever it may be? Is it okay to have mom and pop? Giving us kind of a rough outline of where they see their brand. Now, that being said, working with us, that's the best part of it, is able to collaborate and see, well, we think this, and working together on that front of whether we think their brand should be, not in Whole Foods or in Whole Foods. So I think that is kind of the greatest first step.
One of the things that you mentioned was direct to consumer data. So I've been with enough wineries to know that sometimes they don't think you guys want to hear that data. That's just the truth. They're like, okay, don't mention direct to consumer. Don't tell them what. I thought it was really interesting that you said, no, share that with us so we could find out who's buying your wine in a particular market. I think that's really enlightening, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it doesn't mean, it's more demographics that you're talking about, or varietals that are selling, or wines that are more popular. I mean, that's basically what you're really looking at, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was very, very interesting. Now, in terms of also the chain, do you find that every new supplier, just has automatically, I want to be in Whole Foods, or I want to be Michelin 3-star?
Yes.
Because, by the way, there's a lot of 1 and 2s out there as well that do sell a ton of wine. So do you find that happens, Patty, as well?
Yes, absolutely. And, that, again, there is a model for that. If you have never been in a chain, I could probably say for the three of us, like, it probably is not going to happen in the first couple.
Yeah.
You come
if you've
down,
never actually been in the chain, it may not be for you.
There is a route to get there. I mean, these chains are not taking on new brands unless there's data behind it as well. So but there's a route to that. We can look at some regional chains. There is a route to get to that level. We have to decide what that end game is and the steps to get to that end game.
And Cindy, thank you very much, Patty, by the way. I thought that was very interesting, especially some of the things you've outlined. But Cindy, you've been in a lot of these introductory meetings, or when wine suppliers, let's say they change houses from one to another and they move over to you guys. Please talk a little bit about your experiences with what you think world-class, excellent first meeting looks like.
I think it starts with the very first phone call or connection that you're having. I mean, you have to understand who they are. I mean, to what Darren's point was, you have to understand where they are, what they're doing, and where they've been, and who their consumer is, like the DTC model. Not only who's buying it, but what is your retention on your DTC list? How often are people dropping off your list? Do they stick around for a couple years and then fade out? Do they touch base? What is it that they're buying? How do you connect with them? What is your e-commerce platform? What are you doing to reach the millennial that only shops by their iPhone? What do you do? Or I'm sorry, worse yet, the Gen Z and Gen Y and everyone else, that's where they are. And then you got to understand where you can start putting the puzzle pieces together to figure out what they want to do if they have a pretty refined program. I mean, so if a winemaker can come in and sit with us, and one of the first things I'm going to do, probably spend a couple hours with them, understanding who they are, and maybe if they don't have a great idea of who they are, who they're trying to connect, that's where we can layer in and start saying, to Patty's point, your competitive set. This is where we see this. Let's not even talk about change. And my God, I don't even think you're ready for a Costco roadshow, which is they will come in and say something like that for a little while, because we have to build your base. And that's going to happen in independent retail. It's going to happen in this strata of on-premise. What does your buy the glass program look like? And what is your resource to support programs such like this? So we really need to understand the full 360 and put a plan together that can be communicated very clearly with accountability and expectation through the entire enterprise, and understand which route to market, whether it's signature, whether it's artisanal, whatever we are working on, and who touches that. And to Darren's point, maybe that's 5 markets. Maybe you're in Florida, New York, maybe you're this, that, and the other. And then also supply chain. We need to understand how you ship, how you go to market, who you're working with, so that we can decide and work with you, whether it's going to be someone in our supply chain who is truly your one-stop shop dedicated to you as a fine wine person, or you're going to be, or it's something that can be, you're part of the consolidation of American Canyon and Western Wine Services and all of that. We need to understand the level of service that you need from us in order to meet your expectations, with a clearly defined plan as to who you are and how we're going to work together before we've even shipped box 1.
So, I've had the privilege, as we were mentioned before, with Jess Jackson and Rick Tigner and these industry, greats, to work also for Stephen Brower and Bill Newlands, who's the head of Constellation now.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I've learned from them was simplicity in the massive amount of details. So as you're talking, Cindy, right now, I'm thinking of all the things that I had to have my team prepare to sit in front of you guys to get all of that out. It's just a huge amount of details, and everything you're mentioning is absolutely relevant. But how do you communicate that? I know that this might be kind of getting down to the how you do it, but I really think it's important that you kind of give just a little tip on what does that mean? Like, is it a 30-minute meeting of just boom, 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 boom? And then if there's questions, you can dive into each one. Because you guys meet with a huge amount of people. You have just a lot of suppliers, and you give a lot of them a tremendous amount of attention, which I don't know how you guys do it. It must be fueled by the coffee industry somehow. But the actual getting ready for the meeting and what to present I've seen sales reps like start sweating as we walk in the room, and I'm like, it's okay. I talk them down. It's like, we're going to be fine. I screwed up enough for all of us in the last 20 years. So, but that pains people. It pains winery owners to figure out, is it 20 minutes? Is it 30 minutes? I know everybody's unique, but Cindy, is it an hour of just massive data, or is it just distilling it down to a place?
No, Eric, quite frankly, and I'm sure that Patty and Darren would agree with me, it's a conversation. And I think what we spent the first, half hour of this call was sharing our experiences, which is really what it is. You're sharing, I've been there. I've been the supplier. I know what it's like when you leave a meeting and you're walking out, Kendall Jackson walking out of a distributor meeting in Nevada or wherever, and you're just going, are they really going to do this, or was this just a bunch of lip service and shine on just to get me out of the office?
That's when Randy Ullum would look at me and go, that ain't going to happen, or that's going to happen.
Well, exactly. and being able to have the authenticity to say, and the courage, the corporate courage to say, this is not something, kind of what Patty was saying, like, let's not rush to the chains right now, because that's like 5 powerful Nielsen buyers. And guess what? They already made their decisions in February, and we're talking in July,
6 months ago. That's a great point.
You want to talk chains? I need your O&D program right now, because I got to expedite it to some guy. That's how far in advance. And do you want it built there? So, it does take time. Don't get in this business if you're not willing to spend the time and build the relationships and understand that we're the final link in the chain. And this is what I tell my folks is there's growers, enologists, viniculturists, the people who harvest at 2 a.m., the people that are carrying it crate by crate off of Howell Mountain, or crate by crate in the hilly Beaujolais, that are relying on us to get it right. So it's worth the time to understand who they are, and make sure that we have the correct plan, which we call supplier planning guidance. And it's a form. I mean, it's a workbook. It's a portal we have where we can go in and start taking this information and plugging it in for the AOP. And we'll do an AOP for the smallest winery to Diageo. And that's really, it's the same process, but their conversations are different.
Right.
Okay?
So Southern
it's
Glazers.
way more personal when you're sitting with the winemaker owner who's looking at you saying, I made 10,000 cases. Well, that's really good news because we can sell 15.
So I actually like that. So the portal itself kind of forces a supplier, regardless if it's, Pernod Ricard
It's
or
collaborative.
right. It just
We don't
gets you
have
down to the finer
Here
details.
you go. Come back to us. No.
Right. All right. So Patty, Darren, I'm going to ask the same question to you guys. Darren, why don't you go ahead? What does, how does that information get to you? Because again, it's an overwhelming amount of information from each supplier that you have to take in. And we are trying to tell you, we're going to sit there and talk to you as long as you allow us to, which I never was a fan of. So for my team, I always say, you got to cut it off at some point, move on and let them get on with their day. What's your take on this?
Yeah, my take on it is that, for us, really, it really can start at the individual market level. We have an aspect team in every market that has a leader. And, often the conversations percolate up from each individual market because, they're in complete, spans both coasts of the country. There's a lot of different sort of regionalities to the markets that we deal in. And in some, not every market's for everyone, like I said earlier. So
Right.
Often it will start at the more state level and then distill up to a larger conversation. The one thing I want to say, just kind of echoing Cindy's point, is that we do the same thing. If you come in, even if you're an allocated brand that has, here's your allocation, we have an AOP that we're going to build out and collaborate with you. There's a plan. The days of just, hey, we picked up this because we picked up this wine, this brand for whatever reason, and, we're just going to see how it goes and sell what we can and see what happens. I mean, even down to the smallest producer, that's over. I mean, data matters. Data wins the day. Yeah. And we need to make decisions, from a fiduciary responsibility to our ownership. We've got to make decisions that are based on really smart, deep, intensive analytics and data, and you got to have a plan no matter how small you are. And then one thing I wanted to jump on kind of the bandwagon that Patty was mentioning is that as far as building out what your strategy is, having your DTC analytics is really, really good, but also to back that up is think of 3-tier as when you're going to the wholesaler. Okay, well, what does that look like? What does my brand plan look like? What is my brand hierarchy? What is my halo brand? What is my point of entry? It's probably going to be completely different than your DTC brand. Understanding that winemakers are artists at their heart. They're going to be making they're up in Petaluma Gap growing Trousseau Gris, and they want to put that out DTC, but it's probably not part of their 3-tier start. And what I would say is that for your brand plan, your brand hierarchy, start, less is more. Get focused around what's my point of entry? What's my by the glass? Do I have a lighthouse or halo, tier? And then build that out and come in with that. Here's how we see our brand intersecting the marketplace. Here's the DTC that we see. By the way, we do all these other little fun stuff to satisfy, the itch that our winemakers have to really be creative. But that's not what we're here to talk to you about. We're here to talk to you about, X, Y, and Z. And that's what we really see as the best point of entry into 3-tier.
Again, going back to that point, that simplicity point as well, I had my teams on one page for everything: the brand voice, brand plan, brand positioning, everything you just mentioned right there. The details of data and everything was one page. You should be able to see it. And by the way, I had Mum Napa on that massive brand, and little brands like Vineyard 29. Absolutely true that you could find a one-pager that can put all that in there. And the reason why I mention it, and I think you agree with this, Darren, is that it just kind of makes you focus. This is a theme over and over again for my experience with working with you guys. It just makes you focus that everything is there. Everything is simple. It kind of makes you force yourself to not write a paragraph about your brand positioning, that you can actually get it in 1 or 2 sentences. But one thing you mentioned, Darren, that really just stuck with me as well, is the state by state, kind of the market by market. You're basically saying that you're letting the experts that are in each market really, because that is just so specific to each market across all your companies. I don't think enough people ask questions too, Darren. Like when they go to Aspect team, in each market, the same brand plan kind of doesn't work, right? So I don't mind my team walking in going, I don't know if this works in XYZ state. Can you tell me, based upon the way we positioned ourselves, what may or may not work? Because we don't ask you guys enough for your expertise on the state level, really, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, if you have, again, markets run the gamut across the
right?
the country.
Completely different.
Yeah, and some are, if you really see your brand as being developed in the on-premise, you're truly, this state-driven, small, farm-based, winery.
Right,
It's really all about, hey, we're farmers first, that kind of notion, but we're making, a small amount of really high-end, nice wine that's all state-driven, and you decide, really want to build this probably in the on-premise to begin with. Well,
right.
Certain markets, you're going to get to, they're really big chain on-premise markets. The independent on-premise isn't, there's markets you probably could skip at first and not really put a lot of leverage against trying to get into, because the markets are really driven by larger national chains, for example.
And everybody focuses California, Texas, Florida, and sometimes some of the biggest markets of the small brands that I manage were like Ohio or Pennsylvania, or I'm making things, Nevada. It's pretty tremendous,
Right. Yeah, exactly. And figuring that out. And then the other thing about what will work in the market, the other part of that is that each market has a little bit, for us, and I think for Patty and Cindy as well, is that each market has a little bit different product mix, especially when you get into the fine wine kind of platform or division. So where are those gaps and niches? You might be, like I mentioned earlier, that Trousseau Gris producer from the Petaluma Gap, and it just might be that the market, you're like, yeah, I want to talk about this market. Well, they've got Sonoma Coast on down through Petaluma Gap out in spades already, and it's it wouldn't be beneficial to either of us for us to just collect another
one in there.
That we already have a stable full of brands that fit that niche. So you got to mix that combination in too. So I think, again, for the smaller wineries, and I think, what the premise of this discussion's about is that, a market by market approach has to be, probably front of mind. And then just, I think, Cindy mentioned it, give me your plan for O&D. Not now. I think you had for the chain, you had to have it 2 months ago.
I'll give you an example that we would start in November, December, having presentations to build our POS for a holiday the following year. So when I was with big wineries, to all the small wineries out there, when I was with big ones, and my marketing team had to start thinking about the following holiday while we were actually in holiday for the current rollout. It was that far in advance. So it's an excellent point. It's not something you could turn on like that. It's at least 10 months.
And it's not even as much of a lead time as it is that's a marathon. So right now you're talking about, you're wanting to get into 3-tier distribution. That's a goal down the road. That is not a sprint. That's a marathon. But the way you do it is you do start building analytics in the states you are in 3-tier through your independent retailers. You start getting into these regional chains, these smaller regional focused.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think Patty mentioned
that multiple stores where you got, they're all over the country where there's 6, 7, 8 stores that are owned by one family. Start working those angles, and then your aspiration can be to get into that national chain. But I can't think of a brand that has just that is just one singular standalone brand that has come up, hey, I'm out on the wine scene, I'm going into 3-tier, and then they just launch right into a Kroger set. It just doesn't happen.
Patty, I'm going to move on to you now. Thank you, Darren, to talk a little bit about ongoing management. Now I've approached this topic more of like, hey, starting off with you guys and those kind of things. A lot of jobs that I came into, of course, we had existing relationships, with RNDC around the country, and there's always a challenge also with teams, even if you're using brokers, sales reps, however, if it's a single owner or if it's a small sales team, how to work with your teams moving forward, because you could have the killer first meeting, Patty. I mean, you could go in, slay you guys. You guys are all yes, everybody's hugging, kissing. Now we could do that vaccinated. And then after that, we leave and it launches, and then it kind of goes quiet first because you guys are busy. You got a lot of suppliers you got to talk to, and we get very worried. We're like, oh my God, I haven't heard from this team. And it's a big thing on how to manage wholesalers for a small supplier ongoing, without bothering you too much, bothering you enough, having goals. So let me take a step back and please tell us a little bit about the normal everyday working with RNDC, for example, in your team, than just this, starting off.
Yeah, well, for a smaller supplier, I mean, your direct day-to-day or maybe once a week contact is your portfolio manager. That's the person that is that you're going to be tied to the hip with, of talking about your plans, how you're executing that plan. All of our companies have the data that you can, every morning you log in, you can see what shipped, where to. So that is all very transparent. So that information is at your fingertips. Now, I'm hoping everyone agrees that, it's the worst thing to do is only call when there's a problem, right? I mean, so, a great email of just, hey, I saw that you guys got this wine at this so-and-so account. What a great, awesome. We're so excited. We can't wait to go there and support that account. Because in the end, we all want to do business with people that we like. Yeah. And I think you could be the big guy or you could be a little guy, but, I think I don't know if there's a magic number of only talk to us once a month or whatever it may be. That's not really the case. It's really, we're in a partnership and we're doing this together. So, you may not get a call back right then and there because, like you said, we're a larger company and we're very busy, but somebody will call you back. And, and within my job, if one of my smaller suppliers is having trouble getting a hold of someone in the state, then they call me and I will jump in. So we're all trying to help each other out. And, because I have that answer instead of bugging that one guy that, has the answer also, but also has 20 other things to do. And I can help them in other ways. So right. There's different layers within our companies that I think you can have some sort of touch point, however often you wanted to, really.
And what about working the market too? One of the things that I've worked for wine companies where the owner's like, we got to be out there selling ahead of everything and just, handing deals over. And I've had others saying, no, that's their job. Let's stay away from it, right? You see suppliers kind of handle both. What's RNDC's take on that?
We are open arms for you working the market. Now,
and what does that mean to you? Yeah, because there's sometimes
two different ways.
You just want someone running around selling wine, or no, you really?
Yeah, we would love someone running around selling wines and then calling our salespeople saying we just got that placement. The other flip side is a supplier that wants a traditional work with, which essentially now is kind of null and void because
right.
I think it was already a weird concept of, getting in a car with someone and, getting on a cattle call of 7 calls because that person had to go to that account anyways to take an order.
Yeah.
But, we are happy to set up work with and stuff, but, I think the traditional work with, I think it's all about high spotting, saying, hey, this guy is in this county, hey, why don't I just meet you at this one account, and right. Let's spot, this sales rep said, I have this opportunity here, calls the supplier, said, hey, why don't you meet me here? Let's show this wine. Let's talk about your wines to this account. I think that is way more effective. But any personal relationships or existing relationships that someone can have out there is open arms.
Let me ask you a very specific question too. Let's say a sales rep, because the smaller wineries maybe don't have someone in that market, right? They're going to fly in and that's their once every 6 months that they come into this larger market. Do you want that person calling ahead of time on these accounts and setting up appointments on their own and then telling the RNDC, hey rep, I got a great one here. You don't need to come to this one. I got this one. I mean, is that kind of what you envision, or do you want them to come into the market and immediately connect with you guys and then go on more of the work with kind of route? Or is it a mixture of both? Depending.
I think it's a mixture of both. I mean, we definitely want to know if they're in the market, because there's some touch point somebody will want to either meet up and have lunch or whatever, just to have that face to face. Because again, we are in a relationship business,
right?
But I think it's a mixture of both. If they come in and they're out on their own, and that's wonderful. If they need our help to help kind of fill in their days and give them some accounts to go to, we're more than happy to do that as well. So I think it's a nice blend of both would be the most productive of the day.
Now, I mean, what you three work with every day is, again, I'm very familiar with your companies and your roles. It's a massive amount of data. It's a massive amount of stuff that comes into you guys. And clearly you're excellent at handling that. And I hope you don't mind me asking some of these more basic questions, because every winery I've gone to, big or small, these are the things that they think about sometimes. And it's really, really fun to hear how your approach is, because they just worry about it quite a bit, other than the big stuff like gathering the data and the brand positioning and all those really important things. But I think that was really excellent insight, Patty. So Cindy, I'm going to ask you something very specific, especially as it pertains to Southern Glazers, which is such a large company. The analytics. So Patty kind of mentioned a little bit about how we work the market, more going in, how we set up meetings, what does it look like ongoing? But obviously you want goals, or I'm assuming you want specific goals, maybe account placement goals, maybe it's volume goals, maybe it's both. And you want to be able to measure those. So can you please, with your excellent, vast experience as well, what do you find that little wineries should expect when we work with the big Southern Glazers in terms of goals and how they're measured?
Well, I think, for all of us here, we talk about, accounts sold, pods, volume, all of that. I think we all live in a world that, if I went through a day without hearing those words like 6 or 7 times, I think I was on vacation. So it's truly, that's what we do. But it's also, we take a look at through our SG Proof platform. And I know that, there's Proovy and the other platforms which can do the same thing, but we get down into algorithms of what's the possibility of this actually being sold. We can take a look at ACV weights, because as all of us do, we want to go where the fish are, the biggest opportunities for those wines, and we can segment by price point. We can take a look at a lot of different opportunities for that supplier. So that, I was thinking about when we were talking about independent retail, and I was back on the streets in LA. Man, did everyone want to go to Wally's and get right in front of Christian Navarro, right? Because if all of a sudden he was buying your Bourgogne Blanc and he happened to say this is fabulous, boom, you're good. And now you not only have that, but in today's world, you have an influencer and you're probably going to be, featured in one of their things at Wally's. So right. I think we use our analytics to help drive and get better data in terms of target sheets. One thing that I know that we've gotten away from is, people say, well, we want your target list. And it's like, okay, I'm going to think like I'm a sales rep. Okay, we've all done it. Where does that target list live? On a clipboard in your back seat with probably a Jack in the Box Coke stain? No. We want to have information that's accountable, that's real time, tracking pods, tracking accounts sold, and tracking where we're going to set up meaningful goal attainment that go back to that AOP, that are going to drive that AOP that we've put together. And right. Now we can start picking out which markets are trending behind, which are trending above, which I'm much more concerned about with like, whoa, before we get into X, Y, and Z, why that is not doing well, this is doing really well. Why? Because I want to replicate whatever they're doing and figure it out. And I want whoever is driving that on my phone with the supplier going, yeah, well, we did this and your guy flew in the market and we did this thing with the consumers. And so bring that on and spread that around, because you know what? That insight is free. And we need to be able to replicate that wherever we can.
So it's
the most important thing though, Eric, is coming together with mutually agreed upon goals. So I think that is the most important thing that we all need to understand, whether it's not a production driven goal. It's not us just, we can do everything for you. It's a mutually agreed upon goal that makes sense.
Right.
Can actually achieve. That's the end game. We are all salespeople, thick and thin, and we want to achieve goals. We all want to win. So that's kind of my kind of takeaway from that.
And the KPIs they're just not volume. We immediately go to volume. I mean, especially with fine wine, I was trained early on, and it was a really amazing kind of flip of a switch that volume didn't matter as much as value. I mean, volume matters in a lot of brands, but if you're especially talking fine wine, value, right? So Cindy, do you guys also track things like value and account placements and all of that? I know you do, but the goal, is there goals on each one of those areas, or does it depend on the strategy?
No, well, the strategy is going to come from those initial conversations we're going to have. And each strategy, some winery may have a very different strategy than another one. And so, right. Yes, we track all of that to make sure that we're growing. And then we have those touch points, the communication. Like if I'm out and I see something good, I'll take a picture and send a text to that wine owner and go, look at this, look, we got it done. Yeah. Because that gets back to that question that I think some of the smaller suppliers, when they think, oh, I'm just going to get lost in a big wholesaler. Well, right. That's really dependent on me and Patty and Darren and everyone we influence within our organizations to be able to have that touch point and be able to say, look what's going well. Look, I thought of you today. And not only that, but I shared it with my team. It's on Chatter. It's all of these things that we loop in. We've got a platform called SG360 where our supplier can get in these Chatter platforms where there's a lot of things happening with, rather than worry about whether you're on Instagram, put it on here and you're going to get feedback and a lot of positive reinforcement for doing these things. And we're all competitive. So if someone goes and gets that particular wine in that particular independent retail or just nailed it by the glass, someone's going to go, oh, I gotta go. I've always wanted to beat Nancy or Blaine or whoever. And just really, it creates a lot of fun competition.
And Darren and Patty, I'm assuming you guys also have systems that are similar to that where you can measure analytics.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we spend most of our time with the Aspect division talking about activation goals. So goals that drive velocity. So think about things that have a life after the goal cycle's over, or things that have a life after the invoice, right? So pods, obviously, accounts sold, social media goals, event-driven goals, whether it be in-store demos, winemaker events, trainings, staff, that staff training. We goal all of that stuff. I mean, we're really, really focused against activation, and again, we're pretty focused against the on-premise and independent retail with Aspect. I would say that having kind of that mutual agreed upon plan or goal, that Cindy and Patty talked about is critical. And then, the days of just handing it off, it's a partnership. There's a lot of communication. So the days of just handing it off are over. Also the days of the wholesaler, not trying to drive that velocity and drive that activation are over. In the old days, it was velocity was a you problem, Mr. Winery owner. But we all three of these organizations have incredible resources that they're putting against really trying to drive that velocity and drive the activation in each market.
All right, thank you very much. So last question. I know that a lot of small suppliers are going to really, really love the answers here because this is something that you think about quite a bit. How do you stay relevant? How do you stay unique? It's very difficult to become and to sustain being a little winery nowadays, especially working with big distributors. So Darren, starting with you, what do you see the trends in 2021 and going into 2022?
Again, as I mentioned earlier, authentic brand story. That's what the consumer, it's not just millennials, to Cindy's point, on down to Gen X, Gen Z. And I would also say that luxury is not going anywhere. We had a little bit of a flat spot before pandemic with overall wine, but luxury had a 5-year CAGR of +6%. And now that the pandemic hit, the luxury space is exploding.
I agree with that. So thank you very much. Patty?
Mine would be luxury. Mine would be also better for you. Different ways of better, and there's many different facets of better for you, whether it's vegan, organic, or whatever, but the better for you category. And as well as social media. I mean, really, the direct touch to the consumer through social media. I think we are that is a huge thing moving forward, and it's gonna get bigger and bigger.
I think that's an excellent point that we didn't really dive into social media. That really wasn't the topic here, but obviously we know we could probably talk for hours just on that. So I think that that's excellent. And Cindy, wrap it up.
E-com. Yes, big trends, and premiumization of e-com and using it as an education platform as well.
Excellent. Well, I thought this was just a tremendous panel, a tremendous discussion. I know that a lot of small suppliers, like I've been with throughout the years, have gained a lot of insight from your experience. I want to say thank you very much to Darren Cliff, to Cindy Leonard, and to Patty Signorelli. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everybody. Again, if you chat on the side, we'll have our panel live at the time that this airs, and we'll answer you guys. But it's been my pleasure to meet you and to host this panel. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.